Hey guys, welcome to the Liberal Hive Mind, a channel solely focused on exposing the abundant hypocrisy of the left. Once again, it seems as though Bill Maher is late on the trend, huh? Here I am once again saying the same thing. Bill Maher always pretends as if he's ahead of the curve. Which in a certain way, I guess he is, within the world of leftism, Bill Maher is certainly ahead of the curve, considering the average leftist mind seems to only go on a straight path right towards communism, never actually asking a very important question, which is, well, is what we're doing actually working? Is it worth it? So Bill Maher's had an aha moment, but unfortunately, let's call it maybe 6 to 8 years too late. We've heard it over and over again from every leftist on the planet. America sucks. Look at all the Nordic countries. Look at Canada. They're all thriving, blissful utopias. Socialist utopias, where everything is free. If Donald Trump or any capitalist, Republican, conservative ever gets elected, I'm moving to the greener pastures of Canada. Yeah, that's been a talking point for a while, and maybe during a certain period there might have been a point, but as per usual, like most top-down communist governments, the unforeseen, unintended consequences slowly start to happen, reality starts to check in, that's the human reality, and eventually disaster strikes. We've been saying it forever. These foreign quasi-socialist nations aren't the secular liberal bastion utopias that leftoids pretend they are, no, quite to the contrary. And of course, as we see, these systems are so incredibly sensitive. The moment you rock the boat even a little bit, the whole thing starts to collapse. It seems as though Bill Maher has finally realized, as he's warning leftists across the board, we need to stop this slow march towards socialism. In other words, he's finally saying what we've been saying. Unfortunately, probably too little too late, but I guess better late than never. Let me show you guys exactly what's going on. We got some stuff to get into, so let's roll the tape. All right, folks, we got a Bill Maher segment over here. Let's go ahead and take a look.
The unemployment rate in the U.S. is 3.8%, and in Canada it's 6.1%. And of the 15 North American cities with the worst air pollution, 14 are in Canada. Canada was where every woke white college kid wearing pajama pants outdoors who'd had it up to here with America's racist patriarchy dreamt of living someday. I mean, besides Gaza. There's only one problem with thinking everything's better in Canada. It's not. Not anymore, anyway. Last year, Canada added 1.3 million people, which is a lot in 1 year, the equivalent of the U.S. adding 11 million migrants in 1 year. And now, they're experiencing a housing crisis even worse than ours. The median price of a home here is $346,000. In Canada, converted to US dollars, it's $487,000. And because of mortgage debt, Canada has the highest debt to GDP ratio of any G7 nation. So does their vaunted healthcare system, which ranks dead last among high-income countries in access to primary healthcare and ability to see a doctor in a day or two. And it's not for lack of spending. Of the 30 countries with universal coverage, Canada spends over 13% of its economy on it, which is a lot of money for free health care. Look, I'm not saying Canada still isn't a great country. It is, but those aren't paradise numbers. If Canada was an apartment, the lead feature might be America adjacent. But I need to cite you as a cautionary tale to help my country. And the moral of that tale is, yes, you can move too far left. And when you do, you wind up pushing the people in the middle to the right. At its worst, Canada is what American voters think happens when there's no one putting a check on extreme wokeness.
I mean, he's straight up saying it. Canada's very quickly becoming a failed state. All of these liberal ideas that have been touted as requirements for progression, well, they're simply disastrous. And really what I want to focus on, the most important element of what he said, was the part about immigration. Nancy Pelosi keeps saying, diversity is our strength, diversity is our strength. Leftoids keep telling us, and actually even some supposed conservatives keep saying, that we need more immigrants, and that Congress should pass amnesty. Without influx of immigrants, how are we going to pay for Social Security and all of these programs? Who's gonna mow our lawn and build our homes? People buy the narrative, hook, line, and sinker, but look at the results. Canada accepted over 1 million people, over 1 million migrants in a single year. And that's in a country of a population, I think, just shy of 40 million. And instantly, homes became totally unaffordable. I mean, you think? That's what happens when you don't have a plan. That's what happens when you kick the can down the road and just say, let's just do things because it make me feel good. And so you implement it based on emotion without any actual thought, no thought process, no plan. We already know the Biden administration has no plan for Social Security, as Janet Yellen mentioned.
The president knows many people on Social Security.
Then why doesn't the president care?
He cares very deeply.
Then where is his plan?
He stands ready to work with
That's
Congress
a lie,
to address.
because when a bipartisan group of senators has repeatedly requested to meet with him about social, so that somebody who is a current beneficiary will not see her benefits cut by 24%, we have not heard anything on our request. And we've made multiple requests to meet with the president. Now, you can't comment on that, I realize that, but that is a fact. And if you've been told to say he stands ready to meet, I will tell you there's absolutely no evidence because we have not gotten our meeting.
Well, what happens when you don't have a plan? You create crisis and you lower the standard of living for your average person. Well, let's not say average person, let's say average citizen. And that's exactly what the Canadian government did. They brought in over 1.3 million migrants in a single year, and that's just in 1 year. I'm assuming we're talking about millions of migrants over Justin Trudeau, the liberal savior's tenure, but there was never a plan to keep up with housing production. In other words, the same amount of homes, but you all of a sudden introduce millions of new people into your country, and now you have a problem of basic supply and demand, basic economics. There's not enough homes for how many people have been let in the country. And what does that do? Inflation. In this case, housing inflation. The cost of an average home in Canada is significantly more expensive, and that's in a country where the average wage is significantly lower than in the United States. In other words, liberals in Canada managed to make everybody poorer, except for the most elite asset class, the people who actually own the real estate, the people who build the real estate. In other words, we're seeing communism in action. But what do you mean? Free stuff, free this and free that. Who needs a home when you have free healthcare? Again, as we learn, there is no such thing as free healthcare, just taxpayer subsidized healthcare, taking money out of people's pockets to put into a huge, bloated, bureaucratic machine that fails to render an effective service at an effective price. Canada has some of the most expensive healthcare that's paid for in taxes, with some of the worst results. We all know what happened during the pandemic. Their entire healthcare system essentially fell apart. We saw that through the daily vlogs of Viva Frei. The system, which is supposedly one of the best funded in the world, could not cope with the increased demand. There is no such thing as this communist utopia that young far-left people fantasize about. It always leads to utter disaster. And of course, when it fails, they'll tell you, well, it isn't real communism. Well, let me guess. What we're seeing currently failing north of the border isn't real socialism. Well, then what is it? Anytime there's a success, it's the successes of socialism. Anytime socialism falls apart, well, it wasn't real socialism. That isn't an argument. That is what we call in this industry copium. And Bill Maher's correct when he says that Canada should be viewed as a warning sign, as a cautionary tale. You know, it's fun and all to point the finger at Canada and to say, oh, look how bad that is. Everything's falling apart. But if you miss the message, if you miss the point, you're going to end up in the exact same place. And that's what people don't seem to understand throughout the entire pandemic. We kept saying the same thing over and over again. Washington keeps spending more money. Joe Biden is increasing people's taxes. What does that mean? When you increase taxes, you are increasing government funding. In other words, you're expanding government. And during the pandemic, we didn't just see government expansion, but we also saw government overreach. Essentially, more power was ceded to the federal government. You think they're going to give that power back? Of course not. Government rarely shrinks. It works almost like a tumor. It grows and grows and grows. It's essentially a malignant virus. Until eventually it becomes so incredibly powerful that there's no going back. And slowly but surely your society becomes more and more socialist, more and more unionized. Just take a look at this, for instance. Let's continue to look north of the border, and keep in mind these are numbers from 2007, so it's a whole lot worse today. This chart shows us how many people across the various different provinces are employed by the government, work in the public sector. Just across Quebec and Ontario, we see roughly 2 million people working in the public sector. That is likely to be a much bigger number today. In other words, roughly 20 to 25% of all employment is government employment. People who are paid way too much to provide very little compared to what the private sector could do with no taxes and really no funding. And of course, Social Security, big government pensions. And so essentially, you have a unionized government government economy that is funded by productive companies and individuals paying absurd amounts of taxes. What you see here is the enemy of production. It's the enemy of progression. You are seeing visualized in data what I mean when I say the malignant virus of big government and socialism, or the public sector. This isn't a world where industry fails to meet basic standards, which then of course leads to closure because you're not turning a profit, you're not providing a good service, and so essentially you're going to eventually go bankrupt. No, this is a world where regardless of the quality of service, you keep your job. In fact, these departments and these industries, these government-controlled industries, continue to grow and grow. Then you get a highly unionized society where people just keep voting for the socialists over and over again because their job and their pension literally depend on it. And honestly, I mean, we're all human at that point. I don't even blame those people. Imagine you get to sit around all day working for the government, pretending as if you're working, but really you're doing absolutely nothing. But you're getting paid basically the same competitive salary as highly productive people in the private sector with a much better retirement plan and much better benefits. Benefits that then the taxpayers have to pay for, of course, until reality rears its ugly head and the government realizes they're in big shit. And so what do? Import over 1.3 million foreign laborers to come into the nation and boost productivity to pay those people's pensions. It's a freaking racket, it's a scam, and obviously it's totally unsustainable. The only way that it's somewhat sustainable is in places like Norway, where it's essentially a small population ethno-state placed right on top of one of the world's biggest oil reserves. You know, within that environment, government services kind of make sense. When the country is so oil rich and there aren't that many people, you can afford these kinds of things. You can maybe make a case for certain government departments helping the people because the plans are actually paid for by industry, by producing oil, not by taxing the productive people of your society, essentially reducing production to pay for the people in your society who frankly don't want to do anything. This form of socialism simply does not work. Whether it's hardcore socialism and central planning, where one government source provides everything for society, or whether it's quasi-socialism or elements of socialism, it simply doesn't work unless you're a rich oil baron nation that doesn't even need to tax its own citizens because the liquid gold coming out of the earth is paying for essentially everything. The myth of the Canadian utopia falls apart, which of course isn't surprising to anybody with a basic rudimentary understanding of economics. Once again, Bill Maher is late to the party, and honestly I think most of what he's saying is going to fall on deaf ears within left-wing circles. He's essentially telling his left-wing comrades who have gone full Marx, hey, let's move towards the center. But those left-wingers have convinced themselves that center politics and free markets essentially equate to fascism. In their world, free market individualism is fascism, and total state control and central planning is somehow a progressive utopia dream. I can't think of anything more stupid. Anyways, that's pretty much what I got for you guys. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to leave a like and possibly subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.